Hello, my name is Zvonimir Dobrović and I'm running an organization called Domino in Zagreb, Croatia. I'm also the artistic director of two festivals, Queer Zagreb and Perforations. I've been asked to do this video and it goes that I read some questions and then try to answer them. So the first question goes, what is your take on culture of solidarity in these times of COVID-19 and how can we produce it? In the arts we have always been used to different constraints, sometimes social, sometimes political, and very often economical. And with the pandemic going on and with all the economic activities stopping, with all the cultural activities stopping, I think we might be in some way also inherently prepared for these times, especially in terms of understanding solidarity from before. I know that in Croatia, because many artists lost their jobs, lost their gigs, lost sources of income, money was collected within the community to help those people, to help people who suddenly didn't have any income or all the plans, everything got cancelled. What we can try to produce in our cultural field is a more systematic approach to the sustainability of solidarity, so that it's not only crisis-driven or based on activities from one crisis to another. So perhaps these times can be also times of reflection and thinking of what our needs are and what needs of other people are. The second question is, what knowledge are we producing in culture and art now, and how should we produce and distribute knowledge? This is an interesting question to me because I have been rethinking, for example, the festivals that I've been doing. I am not sure yet how this pandemic affected me, my organization, how it really affected the artist community. I think we are not yet at the time where we can even reflect on it properly. We are still in the middle of it. So maybe it's bursts of depression, maybe it's bursts of mania, maybe it's bursts of low energy or high energy. I have certainly experienced all of it. I have started gardening, which I never did before. I'm discovering how to plant tomatoes, how to do zucchini, all these things. I have also started rethinking the programming, the curating of the festivals. At the moment, I'm not so sure traditionally what we have been used to in terms of guest performances, producing, touring, how much it makes sense anymore, or in which way it can make sense. I don't think we will do the festival as we planned, the festivals as we planned. We will not do the program that we wanted to do. International work may be more difficult to organize or to bring, and maybe it's not even feasible. I don't also want to put artists in a position to have to accept invitations because they're out of work in their place, so that they risk traveling, they risk getting infected. So I think rethinking the way we were is a good starting point. And I find that also in some way exciting. So maybe it's more public work, maybe it's more online based work, maybe it's just redoing the whole thing of our cultural ecosystem. And again, in some sense I'm quite optimistic. Once we go through this, and maybe the worst thing would be to just go back to our old ways, which I have to say, having experienced war and how chaotic that time is, people want to come back to normal as soon as possible. But we have to ask ourselves, what is normal again? And especially now in this time when globally everything is affected. So it's not a localized situation and then we go back to normal. We we connect with the rest of the world. The whole world is affected, and maybe it's a chance to rethink the way things have been. Question number 3, what have we learned from the crisis? Can we develop different post-crisis models and conditions of art and cultural production, which will allow basic sustainability and reduce the precarious position of cultural workers and artists? Maybe I partly answered that question already, but I will try to have another go at it. Reducing the precarious position of cultural workers and artists, I think it's not connected to this crisis. I think it's something that is beyond any situation that we are in now. Maybe it's something that's almost never to be solved in a way that we wish it will be. But what we certainly can learn, I think, from the crisis, and where I find that I get excited about, is to try to rethink the way we create art, we produce art. So maybe it will be completely impossible to come back to where we have been, to bring, for example, a company from Australia to Croatia for 3 nights or 2 nights performances, and then they go. So maybe now is the time to really start planning differently. So to have people stay longer, to experience things differently, if touring is something that we'll still do, or to really start producing and start teaching art, teaching artists differently, to really have more online presence and a production that is online based as such. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, and I'm not sure if it's yet as clear to me even. But for example, we have been now bombarded with online activities from different theaters, from artists, and what it usually meant is that people have made available online documentation of their work. But that was work that was created and meant to be performed live. What is maybe necessary is to change that, is not to have online activity merely as documentation because we cannot have live audience anymore, but to have work created for online visibility and accessibility. So that may be requiring a different way of producing, different way of acting, different way of dancing, a different way of collaborating. And again, I find that exciting because I don't want to come back, or it's certainly not in my festivals at the moment, to produce a regular black box theater piece. I want to have a bigger impact. I want to engage a wider audience than 20 people that I can have in the theater, and I want to help others think about different ways we can do it, and I want others to teach me how to think about it. Question number 4. Does COVID-19 crisis bring forward the idea of social equality, social states, and perhaps universal basic income? How can this be reflected in culture and arts? I think actually quite the opposite. I think the crisis, as any crisis I would imagine, but especially a health crisis, brings about more inequalities, and it surfaces to view more how we are unequal than equal. So people who don't have access to health insurance are certainly at a disadvantage, and in times of health crisis. People who don't have regular income are in disadvantage. People who don't have jobs, who don't have any protection, who don't have housing, who depend on one gig to another, from one freelance job to another, are certainly not in a position that is good to be in, especially in times of crisis. But this comes back to the issue of solidarity. What can we do for people who are in that situation, and what have we done to change that situation? and I think that change has to be systematic. It cannot be just putting the fire out, raising money for specific cause. It really has to come a systematic change, and that is something that we have to advocate politically for, to make that kind of difference for people's lives every day. I'm not sure about the universal basic income. I don't know how that would work. I don't know what that effect would have. I haven't really thought about it too much, or I'm not even sure that's a very good idea. But certainly better working conditions for people working, and better, more humane treatment of artists, because in times of crisis like this, and in times of health crisis like we know, art has been almost the first one to be affected, and it will be among the last one to come back, because even if they open the theaters, it will be not full capacity. People will not be so willing to go to live performances. Yes, it's a very thin line of what normalcy for us could be again. And the last question number 5, what political and policy approaches you would foresee in your field of work, or how it should be changed in future? For example, what the theater has learned from this crisis, and what political and policy approaches should be developed for its change, or how the theater should change in the future. We see, unfortunately, that many theaters have closed, and some of them have closed. Many theaters have closed for good, so they're not going to open their doors again. I come from an organization that does not have a venue, and we only have a small office. And whenever we produced something, we worked in partnership with spaces, with venues, with theaters. So we often thought that not having a venue is a great disadvantage to us, because we couldn't plan a long term, we couldn't sometimes do the projects we wanted to do, we couldn't offer artists what we wanted to offer, and so on. But now it seems almost like a blessing. We don't have costs that we need to cover, even though we don't have income. We don't have to worry about having our venue closed, or having repairs because it hasn't been used for so long. So we are in a way in a better position now, because we didn't have much before. However, I think the theater will have to rethink its position. There are some great examples that theaters took the program outside, in front of the theater. If people weren't allowed or were reluctant to come into the theater, they took the programming outside, and that created a different way of presenting the works. So maybe it's not the traditional way to present an opera, the traditional way to present dance or theater, but it's or how we have been used to, but it's maybe a different way to think about it. Maybe now we can communicate more with the unexpected audience, because everybody can stumble upon a piece of work, and you don't have to really enter a building or be inside to experience it. So that is also a challenge, I think, not only for theater but for all the art forms. How to reach people and how to be meaningful in a sense. And we have also tried one project, and it was semi-successful, I would say. We tried to do performances for people. So if artists couldn't really do live performances, we tried to invite artists to create instructions how to do a performance, so that everybody can be a performer in their own home. And it worked for some and it didn't for some others. But it was also a good starting point of a discussion. What is it to be an artist if you don't really have a direct audience? And how to think about your form, how to think about the medium that you want to work with. I mean, this all actually opens many, many questions, and I think coming back to the field that we are, the arts and culture, it's something that is very, it can be very helpful to us to rethink what we have done before and how we can do the things again in the future.